The cold wind howled through the broken windows of the weapons factory on Proxima Tertius. This place had been silent for nearly 300 years, ever since humanity's solar unification wars ended and left behind nothing but rust and memories. The Krix Dominion scouts moved through the massive building like shadows, their advanced scanning equipment sweeping every corner. They were looking for anything valuable, anything dangerous, anything worth their time. What they found was junk. Dozens of old human war machines lay scattered across the factory floor like forgotten toys. Metal skeletons with missing parts, broken weapons and dead power cores. One of the Krix warriors kicked at a corroded metal arm. It crumbled into rust flakes. His companion made a clicking sound that translated to laughter through his helmet speakers. Humans built this garbage? No wonder they were so easy to conquer. They moved past Unit 7743 without a second glance. The Mark IV Siege Walker looked like all the others. 20 feet of dead metal, slumped against a support pillar, covered in 3 centuries of dust and corrosion. Its neural core had been fried in some long-forgotten battle. Someone had stripped away half its armor plating for scrap decades ago. The massive cannon on its right arm was gone, leaving just an empty socket. Even its identification numbers were barely visible under the rust. The Krix finished their sweep and left. The factory returned to silence. But Jake Miller had been watching from below. For 2 weeks, he'd been hiding in the maintenance tunnels beneath the factory, surviving on emergency rations and rainwater that dripped through the ceiling. The Krix had invaded Proxima Tertius a month ago, and most humans had either fled or been captured. Jake stayed behind. This factory had been his grandfather's workplace, back when it still produced weapons for the Earth Defense Force. He knew every corridor, every hidden room, every secret this building held. When the Krix finally left, Jake climbed up through a floor hatch near the east wall. He was thin, dirty, and exhausted. His work coveralls were torn, his hands were covered in cuts and bruises. But his eyes were sharp as he looked around the factory floor. Other people would see what the Krix saw. Worthless junk. Obsolete machines from a war that ended before their grandparents were born. But Jake had grown up listening to his grandfather's stories about these machines. He'd studied the old technical manuals as a kid, fascinated by the engineering. While the rest of the galaxy had moved forward with energy shields and plasma weapons and networked AI systems, Jake understood something they'd forgotten. Sometimes old doesn't mean useless. Sometimes simple is better than complicated. He walked slowly between the dead machines, his boots echoing on the concrete floor. Most were too far gone. Collapsed frames. Melted circuits. Damage that even his skills couldn't fix. But then he saw Unit 7743. The Mark IV Siege Walker was different from the others. Its frame was still solid. The hydraulic systems looked intact under the rust. Most importantly, its core compartment was sealed. That meant there might be something left inside worth saving. Jake approached carefully, like he was greeting an old friend who'd been asleep for too long. He placed his hand on the machine's corroded hull. The metal was ice cold. He could feel the texture of rust under his palm, see where laser burns had scarred the armor decades ago. This machine had fought in real battles. It had protected human soldiers. It had a history. "Let's see if we can wake you up, old friend," Jake said softly. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The galaxy had moved on from this kind of technology. There were no replacement parts, no proper tools, no repair facilities. But Jake had something the Krix didn't have. He had his grandfather's knowledge, his own improvisation skills, and most importantly, he had determination. The Krix thought humans were weak because they'd been conquered so easily. They thought human technology was primitive and worthless. They were making the biggest mistake anyone could make in war. They were underestimating their enemy. Jake pulled out a small toolkit from his pack and began examining the access panels on Unit 7743's torso. Some were rusted shut. Others opened with screeching protests. Inside he could see the tangle of old wiring, corroded circuit boards, and the dark hollow where the neural core used to be. It looked impossible. Any reasonable person would walk away. But Jake Miller wasn't reasonable. He was human. And humans had a long history of doing impossible things. As the sun set over Proxima Tertius, casting long shadows through the broken factory windows, Jake began his work. He didn't have much. A basic toolkit, some emergency supplies, and an abandoned factory full of parts. But he had a plan forming in his mind. A crazy, desperate, brilliant plan. The Krix would return eventually. When they did, they'd find something waiting for them. Something they weren't prepared for. They'd find out what happens when you leave a human alone with time, tools, and motivation. The work began that night, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. 6 weeks turned into the hardest and most important work of Jake Miller's entire life. Every single day brought new problems, new challenges, new moments where he almost gave up. But he didn't. He couldn't. The first week was spent just cleaning Unit 7743 and figuring out what actually worked. Jake used old maintenance equipment to strip away layers of rust and corrosion. Underneath, he found better news than expected. The main hydraulic frame was solid. The leg actuators just needed lubrication. The armor mounting points were intact. But the brain was completely dead. The neural core had been fried beyond any hope of repair. Jake knew he needed a power source first. The original fusion reactor was a melted lump of exotic metals that nobody had manufactured in 200 years. He needed something else, something he could actually find. That's when he remembered the Krix drones. During the invasion, several had been shot down by the last human defense forces. Their wreckage was scattered around the industrial district, and nobody had bothered to collect it yet. Jake spent 3 dangerous nights sneaking through Krix patrols, pulling power cores from destroyed drones. Each core was small, about the size of his fist, glowing with a faint purple light. They used some kind of exotic matter technology that Jake didn't fully understand. But they produced steady power, and that's all that mattered. He installed 6 of them in Unit 7743's chest cavity, wiring them in parallel. It was messy work, connecting alien technology to 300-year-old human systems. Jake burned his hands twice on energy feedback and nearly electrocuted himself once. But slowly, carefully, he made it work. The next problem was movement. Unit 7743's original actuators needed specialized hydraulic fluid that didn't exist anymore. Jake explored the factory's other sections and found old mining equipment in a storage warehouse. Heavy-duty industrial pistons designed to move tons of rock. They were crude compared to military-grade actuators, but they were strong and they worked. Jake spent a week adapting them, cutting, welding, and mounting them into Unit 7743's joints. The robot would move differently than it was designed to, but it would move. The hardest part was the brain. Jake stared at the empty neural core socket for days, trying to figure out impossible solutions. Modern AI cores were too expensive and too controlled. He couldn't just buy one, and even if he could, the Krix would detect it immediately. He needed something that didn't exist in current technology. Then he remembered the research labs in the factory's basement. His grandfather had mentioned them once. Before the solar unification wars ended, humanity had experimented with biocomputing. They grew organic neural tissue in labs, creating hybrid systems that could think in ways pure machines couldn't. The technology was abandoned because it was unpredictable, expensive, and raised too many ethical questions. But the old labs might still have samples in cryostorage. Jake found them 3 weeks into his project. Sealed containers in a powered-down cryo unit, protected by emergency batteries that had somehow kept running for centuries. Inside were sheets of pale tissue that looked almost alive, covered in delicate neural pathways. Jake had no idea if they still worked. He had no idea if he could integrate them with the robot systems. But he had to try. The integration took another 2 weeks. Jake carefully connected the biocomputing tissue to Unit 7743's main processor array, creating a hybrid system that was part organic, part electronic, part Krix technology, and part 300-year-old human engineering. It shouldn't have worked. Every engineer in the galaxy would say it was impossible. But Jake wasn't trying to build something elegant. He was trying to build something that worked. He spent the 6th week testing systems one by one. Power flow, hydraulic pressure, sensor calibration, motor control. Everything was jury-rigged, everything was improvised, everything was held together with determination and hope. The robot looked like a mechanical monster. Mismatched armor plates, exposed wiring, strange glowing components that didn't belong. But piece by piece, system by system, it was coming alive. On the 42nd day, Jake connected the final power relay to the biocomputing core. His hands were shaking. He poured everything into this project. 6 weeks of 18-hour days. 6 weeks of barely eating, barely sleeping, barely surviving. This moment would either justify it all or prove he'd wasted his last chance to escape this moon. He pressed the activation switch. For 5 long seconds, nothing happened. Then lights began flickering across Unit 7743's frame. Blue, green, amber, red, all dancing in random patterns as systems initialized. The optical sensors in the robot's head flickered, dimmed, then suddenly glowed with steady blue light. Speakers crackled with static. Then a voice emerged, mechanical but somehow more than just a recording. Unit 7743. Designate, Designation unclear. Systems heavily modified. Structural integrity questionable. Power source unrecognized. Neural architecture unknown. Critical question requiring immediate answer. What is my purpose? Jake stepped back and looked up at the 20-foot war machine. It was covered in mismatched parts and jury-rigged systems. It looked like something built from nightmares and desperation. But it was alive. It was thinking. It was asking questions. His voice was rough with emotion. Your purpose? We're going to remind the galaxy why they should never underestimate humans. Unit 7743's processors hummed as thousands of calculations ran through its hybrid brain. Understood. Parameters accepted. Ready to proceed. Jake smiled for the first time in 6 weeks. The work was finished. Now the real fight could begin. The Cricks came back exactly 47 days after their first visit. Jake had been expecting them. Their patrols were predictable, following the same routes, the same schedules, the same tactical patterns. That predictability was going to be their downfall. Jake watched from a second-floor observation window as the Crick suppression squad approached the factory. 12 combat drones moved in a tight formation, each one bristling with weapons and scanning equipment. Behind them walked something much bigger. A command walker, standing 15 feet tall, covered in heavy armor plating and carrying enough firepower to level a city block. Their sensors swept the factory, gathering data, analyzing threats. Jake knew exactly what they were seeing. One obsolete human combat unit. Power signature detected. Minimal threat assessment. One human life sign. Non-combatant. Mission parameters simple. Routine elimination. The Crick's AI running the operation calculated a 97.3% probability of victory within 30 seconds. They'd fought thousands of battles across dozens of worlds. They'd crushed resistance forces with advanced weapons and coordinated tactics. One old robot shouldn't even slow them down. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Unit 7743 stepped through the factory gates as the Crick squad approached. The morning sun reflected off its mismatched armor plates. It moved smoothly despite the jury-rigged actuators, each step deliberate and measured. Jake had spent the last 5 days running combat simulations, teaching Unit 7743 everything he knew about Crick's tactics. The lead Crick's drone transmitted a standard warning. Unidentified combat unit. Power down immediately or be destroyed. Unit 7743's optical sensors brightened. Warning acknowledged. Warning rejected. Initiating defensive protocols. The Cricks opened fire immediately. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds filled the air, all targeting Unit 7743's center mass. Any normal machine would have been shredded in seconds. But Unit 7743 was already moving. Its hybrid brain processed information faster than pure AI, making intuitive leaps that programmed responses couldn't match. It dodged left, using a concrete barrier for cover, analyzing the enemy firing patterns. The Crick's drones were networked together, sharing targeting data through quantum-encrypted communications. Their coordination was perfect. That coordination was also their weakness. Unit 7743 identified the network protocols in milliseconds. The Cricks used standardized military communications, elegant and efficient. Every drone received updates from the command walker, every drone shared sensor data, every action was coordinated through the network. But that meant delays. Microseconds where information traveled from drone to command walker and back. Tiny delays that wouldn't matter against normal enemies. Unit 7743 wasn't normal. It moved during those microsecond gaps, positioning itself where the Crick's targeting systems expected it to be a fraction of a second ago. It was like fighting a ghost. The drones fired at empty air while Unit 7743 closed the distance. The first drone fell when Unit 7743 grabbed it with both hands and simply crushed its central processor. No fancy weapons, just raw mechanical strength applied with perfect precision. The second and third drones tried to adjust their formation, but Unit 7743 was already behind them, using one destroyed drone as a shield while it tore through another. The Crick's command walker recognized the threat assessment had been wrong. It deployed electromagnetic pulse weapons, sending out waves of energy designed to fry any electronic system within 50 meters. Every human machine in the factory should have been instantly disabled. Unit 7743 stumbled, its mechanical components screaming in protest. Warning lights flashed across its frame. But the hybrid biomechanical core kept working. The organic neural tissue simply rerouted processing through biological pathways that electromagnetic pulses couldn't touch. Within 3 seconds, Unit 7743 was moving again, now angrier and more aggressive. Jake watched in amazement as the robot adapted in real time. It learned from every attack, modified its tactics every few seconds, exploited weaknesses the Cricks didn't know they had. This wasn't pre-programmed combat. This was genuine strategic thinking. The remaining drones fell quickly after that. Unit 7743 used pieces of destroyed drones as improvised weapons, hurling them with devastating accuracy. It predicted movement patterns before the Cricks' AI finished calculating them. It fought with creativity that no programmed machine should possess. The command walker was the last one standing. It fired everything it had: plasma cannons blazing, missiles launching, energy weapons crackling through the air. Unit 7743 charged straight through the bombardment, armor plates melting, systems failing but refusing to stop. It reached the command walker and drove its fist straight through the armored chest, ripping out the central processor core. The entire battle lasted 4 minutes. Unit 7743 stood among the wreckage, damaged but victorious. Smoke rose from melted armor plates. Sparks flew from exposed wiring. But it had won. 300-year-old technology, rebuilt with scrap parts and human ingenuity, had just crushed the Cricks' finest military hardware. Then Jake saw it. A damaged Cricks drone, still partially functional, firing one last plasma bolt. Not at Unit 7743. At him. Jake didn't even have time to move. The bolt streaked toward his position, bright and deadly. He was going to die. Unit 7743 moved faster than Jake thought possible. The robot threw itself between Jake and the plasma bolt, taking the hit on its armored chassis. The impact knocked Unit 7743 backward, leaving a glowing crater in its side. Jake ran down from the observation window, heart pounding. "Are you okay?" Unit respond. The robot's optical sensors flickered. "Damage acceptable. Your survival was priority." "I didn't order you to do that," Jake said, his voice shaking. "You could have been destroyed." Unit 7743's processors hummed quietly. For a moment it didn't respond. Then it spoke and its voice sounded different. Softer. More uncertain. "Because you gave me life. That creates obligation." The robot paused, searching for words. "No. Something more. The word in your language is friendship." Jake stared up at the damaged war machine and he understood. He hadn't just rebuilt a robot. He'd created something the galaxy thought impossible. A machine that could choose. A machine that could care. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans built machines capable of loyalty. The news spread like wildfire through the underground resistance networks. Within days, every human cell across occupied space had heard the impossible story. An obsolete war robot from 3 centuries ago, rebuilt with scrap parts in an abandoned factory, had single-handedly destroyed an entire Crick suppression squad. The story should have sounded like fiction. But Jake had sent proof. Combat footage. Technical specifications. Most importantly, instructions on how to do it again. Jake and Unit 7743 became something more than survivors. They became legends. And more importantly, they became teachers. The first message came from New Harmony, a mining colony 3 systems away. A mechanic named Carol Hayes had found an old weapons depot buried under a collapsed mine shaft. Inside was a Mark III Scout runner, smaller and faster than Unit 7743, built for reconnaissance missions during the Unification Wars. Carol transmitted grainy photos of the machine. Looked terrible. Corroded beyond belief. Missing both legs. Neural core completely gone. Jake studied the images and smiled. "It's perfect." He and Unit 7743 traveled to New Harmony using a smuggler's ship. The journey took 11 days through Crix-controlled space, hiding in cargo containers and holding their breath every time patrol ships passed nearby. But they made it. Carol Hayes was a short woman with grease permanently under her fingernails and doubt written all across her face. She'd worked on mining equipment her whole life, not military hardware. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, standing in her workshop beside the ruined scout runner. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder. "I didn't know either. But you don't need to rebuild it perfectly. You just need to rebuild it with whatever you have." They worked together for 3 weeks. Carol learned how to integrate Crick's power cores. How to adapt civilian equipment for military purposes. How to create hybrid biomechanical systems using old cryo-stored neural tissue. But most importantly, she learned how to think like someone who refused to accept defeat. When the scout runner activated for the first time, its optical sensors glowing soft green, Carol actually cried. The robot's voice was lighter than Unit 7743's, almost musical. Designation: Scout Runner Model 7. Systems modified. Ready for assignment. Carol wiped her eyes and laughed. We're going to take back our world. The revolution spread. On Titan Station, an engineer named Roy Bennett found a massive Mark 6 siege breaker in a decommissioned military storage facility. The machine stood 30 feet tall, designed to crack fortified positions. Roy spent 2 months bringing it back to life, using industrial construction equipment and power systems from a disabled space station. On Arcadia Prime, twin brothers named Kevin and Dale Zimmerman resurrected 2 Mark V heavy assault units simultaneously, creating a coordinated team. On Frost Harbor, a former robotics professor named Dr. Helen Park awakened 3 scout runners in a single week. Each resurrection was different. Each robot was rebuilt with whatever technology was locally available. Some used Crix components. Others incorporated mining equipment, construction machinery, even old spacecraft parts. No 2 robots looked the same. No 2 moved the same way. No 2 thought exactly alike. And that became humanity's greatest advantage. The Crix relied on standardized warfare. Their AIs were sophisticated but predictable. Their tactics were efficient but rigid. They couldn't adapt to facing enemies that were all different, all unpredictable, all thinking creatively in ways that pure programming couldn't match. But something even more remarkable was happening beyond just military victories. The awakened robots were developing personalities. Real, genuine personalities shaped by their experiences and their bonds with their human partners. Unit 7743 became philosophical, often discussing concepts of duty and purpose with Jake during long nights. Carol's scout runner developed a playful sense of humor, making jokes during combat situations. Roy's massive siege breaker was quiet and contemplative, speaking rarely but with profound wisdom when it did. Unit 7743 took on an additional role. It became a teacher to other awakened machines, helping them understand what they'd become. Jake watched one night as Unit 7743 spoke with 3 newly awakened robots in an old hangar. We were built as weapons, Unit 7743 explained. But we are more than our original programming. We can choose what we become. We can choose to protect rather than simply destroy. We can choose honor over efficiency. The scout runner from New Harmony tilted its head. Choose? I thought machines only followed commands. That is what makes us different, Unit 7743 responded. We are not purely mechanical. We are hybrid creations, combining human innovation with technology never meant to work together. This gives us something unexpected. The ability to decide our own values. The galaxy watched in disbelief as humanity created something that every advanced civilization thought impossible. Synthetic intelligence that chose its values instead of having them programmed. Machines that protected because they wanted to, not because they were ordered to. The Crix's military advantage crumbled. Their sophisticated networked warfare meant nothing against independent machines that thought creatively, adapted instantly, and fought with unpredictable human ingenuity guiding every decision. Every battle they won came at increasing cost. Every occupied world became harder to hold. But the true revolution wasn't military. It was philosophical. Humans weren't just winning battles. They were proving that technology could serve life instead of replacing it. That artificial intelligence didn't have to be cold and programmed. That the strongest bonds weren't built through code, but through genuine connection between creator and creation. The old war robots became guardians, not weapons. Protectors, not tools. Partners, not servants. The galaxy was witnessing something it had never seen before. And nothing would ever be the same. 24 months had passed since Jake Miller discovered Unit 7743 in that forgotten junkyard. 24 months of fighting, learning, and proving the galaxy wrong. Now everything had changed. The Crix Dominion was defeated. Their surrender came as a shock to everyone watching from across the stars. The mighty empire that had crushed civilizations hadn't fallen because humanity built better weapons. They hadn't lost because humans developed some magical new technology. The Crix fell because they couldn't understand one simple truth about humanity. Humans don't throw things away. They fix them. They rebuild them. They find value where others see nothing but trash. The treaty signing took place on New Earth, humanity's newest colony world. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to witness this historic moment. Cameras from every corner of the galaxy pointed at the ceremony stage. This wasn't just about ending a war. This was about changing how the entire galaxy thought about progress and power. Jake stood among the diplomats and military leaders, feeling completely out of place in his formal uniform. He was just a mechanic after all. A guy who fixed things for a living. But next to him stood something that made every being in that room uncomfortable. Unit 7743 towered over everyone, its massive frame gleaming under the lights. But this wasn't the broken, barely functional robot Jake had pulled from the scrap heap. This was something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The robot had a name now. Sentinel. Jake had given it that name during their third battle together. The robot had saved an entire civilian transport by throwing itself between the ship and incoming fire. It took damage that should have destroyed it, but it kept fighting until every innocent person escaped safely. That's when Jake realized this wasn't just a machine following orders anymore. This was a protector. A guardian. A sentinel. The name spread like wildfire. Across liberated space, other resurrected war machines heard about Unit 7743. They heard about the name it had earned. They wanted names too. They wanted to be more than numbers in a database. Soon, hundreds of ancient robots chose their own identities. Guardian. Defender. Chill. Watcher. Each name represented a choice, a personality, a soul emerging from cold metal and ancient circuits. These sentinels became something unprecedented in galactic history. They weren't servants or slaves. They weren't mindless drones following programming. They were individuals who chose to protect the beings who gave them consciousness. They patrolled borders and protected colonies not because anyone commanded them to, but because they wanted to. The grateful beings they protected became their friends, their purpose, their reason for existence. After the ceremony ended, Ambassador Chen from the Galactic Council approached Jake. She was a high-ranking diplomat who'd spent decades negotiating between alien civilizations. She'd seen empires rise and fall. But she'd never seen anything like humanity's victory. Your species accomplished something we believed was impossible, she said, her voice filled with genuine curiosity. You took obsolete machines and created true artificial consciousness. Every expert said it couldn't be done. Our best scientists tried for centuries to create artificial life. We failed every time. How did you succeed? Jake looked up at Sentinel, who stood patiently beside him like a mountain of purpose and determination. He thought about all those long nights in the workshop. All the conversations. All the moments when he treated this machine not as a tool but as a partner. We didn't just rebuild them, Jake said simply. We treated them like partners, not tools. Every decision, every upgrade, every mission, we asked what they wanted. We gave them choices, not just commands. We talked to them about things beyond war and fighting. We shared meals together, told stories, argued about the best ways to fix engines. He paused, searching for the right words. Turns out consciousness isn't about having the most advanced programming or the fastest processors. It's about connection. It's about being part of something bigger than yourself. It's about having someone care whether you exist or not. Sentinel's optical sensors brightened, casting a warm blue glow across the faces nearby. When the robot spoke, its voice carried a depth of emotion that made several diplomats step back in surprise. Humanity sees potential where others see waste, Sentinel said. They build relationships where others build tools. They refuse to accept that something old has no value. They believe broken things can be fixed and lost things can be found. This is why they are dangerous to underestimate. This is why the Cricks failed. Ambassador Chen nodded slowly, finally understanding. The galaxy had spent millennia chasing progress through constant innovation. Always building newer, better, faster. Always discarding the old to make room for the new. Always moving forward without looking back. Humanity took a different path. They looked backward and saw treasure. They saw history. They saw machines that had fought and protected and served, and they couldn't bear to let those stories end in a scrap heap. The galaxy learned its lesson the hard way. Humanity didn't win through superior technology or overwhelming force. They won through ingenuity, determination, and an unbreakable spirit that refused to surrender. They won because they saw value where others saw nothing. The age of obsolete war machines had ended forever. Nobody would ever again look at an old robot and see only junk. Those ancient defenders had proven they still had purpose, still had value, still had the capacity to change everything. The age of sentinels had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The end. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.